Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and I'm back with a stepped up emergency card kit. This is kit 41 and we're going to use that sketch to make a sliding lock mechanism, and we're going to make it 3 different ways. You do not need these supplies to do this. Now here's the kit. It is color and art and flowers. There are circle sentiments, rectangle sentiments, and then strip sentiments, all using that theme. The strip sentiments are available in 4 fonts and in black text on white and white text on black. And then there's also a bunch of sub sentiments. These were inspired by the Spellbinders August Club kits. And there's a whole bunch of word dies in there. Generic stuff like hello, thinking of you, big hugs. You probably already have things that this will work with. And so I have those sub sentiments, and then I have them in larger fonts, which many of you have asked for. If you are interested in this free download, all I ask is that you subscribe to my channel and then ring that bell so you'll be notified every time there's a new free kit. Today, we are also going to be pulling sentiments from the More Holiday kit that came out last fall and from the Favorites kit from last winter. So I will also link to those below. Lots and lots of free stuff. On the last page of the kit, when it originally came out, is a card sketch that looks like this. But today there's a new page available for that download, and it shows you how to make this sliding lock mechanism. So for this first card, we're going to make it following the sketch, including the circle. But if you did the mystery craft along, which was a live stream I did with my friend Lynn over at LV Handcrafted and some of our other buddies, I will link to that. This was the mystery craft along card that I designed for all of us. So I'm starting with a card base that's 11 inches by 4¼ inches. And I am scoring at 2 1/8 of an inch. And then it says 7 5/8, but I have a short scoreboard. So I am going to fold on this first score line. It's going to be a valley fold towards the front of the card. But then once I fold that over, I will just tuck that fold line right against the left-hand side of my scoreboard, and I can score the second line at 5½. It's a standard A2 size card when it's done. So I will fold on both of those score lines towards the front, both valley folds, and then I'm going to take this longer flap and I'm going to trim off a sliver. It's not quite 1/8 of an inch, okay? I want a little gap between those 2 flaps for our sliding mechanism. Then I have 2 pieces of cardstock, and actually I have one that's 3 1/8 by 4 inches and then 1 7/8 by 4 inches. That's the piece on the left, is that 3 1/8. If I was gonna make this again, I would do 3 inches. And actually I've adjusted that on the printable only for the sliding lock mechanism. Because we trimmed off that sliver, the margins are more equal if you get rid of that 1/8 of an inch on that larger piece of pattern paper. Then I have 4 circles. These are all 3 1/2 inches. They're all the same size. They could be all the same color, but I kind of like that pop of color on the inside. I'm scoring these in half. So that's 1 3/4 of an inch. And then I am going to fold on those score lines and burnish them so that they're really pressed flat. I'm using 65-pound cardstock for the pink circles. They're easier to fold and they're less bulky, where that dark blue cardstock is 100-pound cardstock. You can do the pink ones with 100-pound cardstock, but this is just a little easier. So I found the back of my circle, it's die cut, right? So there's a nice side and then a less nice side. And I'm going to glue my 2 folded circles onto the back of that. They should completely disappear when I look at it from the front. Okay, so I am just butting those fold lines right up against each other. And then when I flip it around, you can't really see them. So here I have this sort of ornamenty looking thing. I want to make sure that those stay folded the way I originally glued them down, and then I will add the other circle. So now if I sort of open this up, it almost is like a butterfly, which is kind of funny because we're going to make a butterfly later on, but that creates our mechanism. That's it. It wouldn't have to be a circle. It could be a square. It could be a diamond. We're going to make one out of a butterfly. All it has to do is slide through that slot. So I now have the rest of the pieces from my sketch. I have a 3-inch circle. I cut it from the treasured gold cardstock from Spellbinders that I've been gushing about, but I am not sacrificing an entire 3 by 3 inch diamond for this. So I cut out another die from the center, and I'll use that on another project. And then I just filled it back in with a piece of scrap cardstock. I like having my circle in the card through that mechanism slot and then centered before I add my diamond. This diamond fits perfectly top to bottom. The tips will touch the card, and then on the right hand side it touches the edge of the card. Okay, so it's really important that it be centered or it's going to start looking kind of funky. These are my standard mats, a 2-inch circle and a 2.5 by 1.5 inch rectangle. I cut some dies out of the middle of that rectangle. No one's going to see it. It's going to be great. I could glue that down and add a sentiment and call it a day. Like, this is it. And it's got this cool mechanism. It will stand up, but I wanted to do some die cutting. This is the stepped up version of the kit after all. This is the Christmas wreath add-on, and there are so many incredible independent pieces on here. And so I'm gonna take this tree, which actually I haven't used in a video since the More Holidays Sentiments kit that we're gonna pull from later. So when you click on that video, you can see this tree done a different way. I used a pencil to mark where I wanna put the little ornaments on my tree, because otherwise I'll be here all day. I then just add little dots of glue, and then I'll pick them up with the wax end of my pickup tool, and I'm alternating. I have 3 colors. I find that that works best for me, is to alternate among 3. And then I didn't think you wanted to watch all that. So I edited it out. Normally I probably would have left it, but this video is a little long anyway. Let me know if you're like, Sarah Liz, I don't care how long the video is. Show me all the baubles and I will make changes for next time. So this is the More Holidays kit. There is circle sentiments, and then there are strip sentiments. I wasn't doing rectangles yet, but I'm just using a strip sentiment for this one. I wasn't sure which one I wanted. So I have Slay All Day, like SLEIGH, and then I have I Believe in Your Magic too, which I think is something that more people need to hear in their lives. So I'm gonna ultimately use the longer one. I wasn't sure if it was gonna be too long for this layout, but it's not. I glued it onto a 3/8 inch strip of that same navy cardstock, and then I just trim off the right hand side, right? I make sure that the margins are equal on the top, bottom, and left, and then it's easy enough just to match up the last one. I went to glue my tree down, and I'm setting down my sentiment, and it feels like the tree is floating. And as I was going back and editing, I was like, actually, I think it looks fine. But at the time, it needed a trunk, and there is no trunk in this die set. So I cut one. How hard can it be? It's an organic shape, and if it looks weird, it's just a tree trunk. So I cut 2 swoopy sides, and then I kind of rounded the bottom a little bit so there weren't really pokey corners. If you were super worried about it, you could tuck it underneath the sentiment, but I'm not. I'm just going to tuck that right underneath the tree, and then that should be my card complete. But I decided I didn't like the pattern paper. Why do I do this to myself, you guys? So I grabbed some different pattern paper. This is just a snowflake pattern from Echo Park. And I'm coming up from the bottom with some light blue ink, not teal. I'm team teal all the way, but I don't see teal in the blue of this cardstock, so I wanted to match that. Then I'm adding a little bit of Delicata white shimmer ink over the top of that, only towards the bottom half. And look at the shimmer. It's super subtle. You could absolutely skip it, but my friends, it's so pretty. Then I created a separate card base. I could have glued this on top of the other pattern paper, but I'm just going to save that card base and use it for a different arrangement. And now I'm going to get 2 cards. So once that card base is done, I'll just steal my mechanism, my sentiment, my tree, and I'll slide that onto my new card. And card number 1 is actually done. You'll have to let me know which pattern paper you like better on this card. We're making 3 versions of this mechanism today, and I have to say this is the one that works the best. I think it's the most foolproof. It slides the best. If you were gonna start with a beginner version of this, that's what I would do. This is the one that we made in the MCA, the Mystery Craft Along, and it's using diamonds. This is that same 3x3 inch diamond or square that we had in the card sketch, and I'm taking 2 of them and scoring right down the middle. I have a white line of gel pen that I drew through one of the lines on my scoreboard. So I just lined up the top and bottom tips right on that line, and then I'm gonna fold and burnish these really well. I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to mark the back mostly for you, and because all my cardstock is the same color on this one, and I am going to go ahead and line these up. I do find that compared to using a die, like I just cut these with my trimmer, I do sometimes have little pieces of cardstock that are sticking out from behind my diamond. You can just take your scissors and trim that off. I did it off camera here. It's all the same color cardstock. Honestly, you can't really tell. I'm going to make sure that both of those diamonds are folded shut, right? So the fold lines are right in the center, and then I'll put the fourth diamond on top, and that is my mechanism, okay? I'm not showing you the whole card for this one. If you really, really want to see how I made this card like top to bottom, let me know in the comments below. But again, this was getting really long. So I thought, let's show you the mechanism, and then there's one other really cool thing I want to show you. So this is the Fall Treats die set from scrapbook.com. And I decided that I wanted my sentiment to fit on this mug, but I can't cut it out with the mug because it's a solid die. So I used the mug and I cut it out from some vellum, just like regular old plain old vellum. And I'm adding a little bit of adhesive to the top and bottom. I don't want adhesive to go over the top of my toner because it can lift it a little bit. So I will center it so it's in the middle of the mug, and then I can take that die and lay it right over top of the vellum piece. I'll wiggle it around and it'll pop right on there like a puzzle piece, and then I can cut it out even though I can't see through that die. It's also worth noting that I printed those at half size. I printed 2 per sheet instead of 1 per sheet. I will link to another video that shows you how to do that. I've done it a bunch of times in videos now, so I didn't feel like I had to show it again. I am trimming off the top and bottom of the mug and the handle. At the top and bottom, there is a debossed line that I am just following. And honestly, I do kind of a shady job at first here. And then sort of off camera, I'll put it right in front of my face where my eyes can actually see it, and I'll clean it up a little bit. I decided later on too that I wanted it light blue to go with some of that cardstock that I embossed in the background. So I just went over that with a blending tool. And that is my second card, right? And this just has that same kind of mechanism. This one, again, doesn't slide quite as smoothly as the circle, but it still works really, really well. And then there's this one. My friends, I can't get over this. Like, I don't think I've made anything this beautiful, maybe ever, ever. So this is the Peacock Butterfly die set from Spellbinders. And then we're also using that Feather Flourish 3D embossing folder. But then this other peacock came out in the spring. That's the Kaleidoscope peacock, way fewer pieces. And there's another embossing folder called the Peacock Motif. There's also a bunch of like Better Press and some other fun things that came out in that sort of peacock release. I can link to the whole release if you'd like. But I really just wanted like the 2 peacock dies and the 2 peacock embossing folders. I actually did all of this the night before because I wasn't sure how long it would take for these to dry. I'm using a handful of Distress Mica stains and Distress Spritzes just to add a little bit of iridescence and shine. I'll link all of the ones that I used below, but it's mostly Uncharted Mariner, Shiny Bauble, Peacock Feathers, Wicked Elixir, Twisted Citron, and it worked so beautifully, right? Just a little bit of shine, especially on the purple cardstock. I was very pleased with how they turned out. For my background, I have a piece of cardstock that is bigger than A2 by about 1/2 inch each way. And I have put it in our Feather Flourish embossing folder, and I'm using some black shimmer ink from Delicata. It's a pigment ink. It's really easy cleanup. Some pigment inks are not, and it dries beautifully, like pretty quickly too. So I'm going to run this through twice. I have used some removable adhesive to keep my piece of paper in place. I will say I'm so close to the edge of my embossing folder that I did have ink kind of ooze out the side, and it ended up all over my hand. And I was like, oh man, I got to finish filming. I used a Lysol wipe and it came right off. I was shocked. I love that it creates just a little bit of darkness in the background, a little bit of shimmer without completely changing the color in the background. So then I thought, okay, but let's change the color of some things. I started with my watercolors. I'm not even linking these below today because it wasn't adding enough color. It dries kind of silver, and it might be that I didn't really mix the paint up very well. So I was just getting the mica on the top and not the pigment. But the Tim Holtz pigments, right? The mica stains and the distress spritzes, the mica is colored. So I was like, well, let's try those. I bought all of the distress spritzes. You can get them in bundles now. And I was like, I don't know. I'm not sure I'll use them. I've used them a bunch already. I've had them for about 2 weeks. And they paint beautifully. This one's actually Wicked Elixir. It's a mica stain that came out in those trios, but you can actually get just individual stains sometimes now. I'll link to whatever is available. So I painted around the outermost layer with Wicked Elixir. It's very green, where like the Twisted Citron is green and has a little yellow in it. That's the one in the bottom right corner on my stamping block. I didn't end up using that one on here, though I thought about it. I was trying to keep it simple though. Then this is the Shiny Baubles mica stain, but Peacock Feathers is almost identical, right? Really the difference in formulation in these is that in the mica stains, the liquid is also colored, and in the distress spritzes, only the mica is colored and the liquid is clear. So if you're spraying them, you get a much different effect, but if you're painting with them, they both work pretty similarly. This last one is Winter Frost. It's another mica stain. And on this one, you can even see it on the block. The mica wants to settle, so you have to make sure you're stirring your paint as you're going. Once I was done, I hit it with my heat tool, made sure everything was dry, and then this is my Brilliance Gold Pigment ink. And you guys, the #1 rule here is to keep your ink pad flat, and I didn't. I stuck the corner in right at the beginning, and I was like, no, but I wasn't starting over. So I was like, we'll just be really careful. I'm speeding this up a little bit because I went very slowly from here on. I hadn't quite realized what I'd done, but I really did just stick the corner down at an angle. And this turns out beautifully. The Brilliance ink pads are archival, and so it's covering up any of that paint from the spritzes or the mica stains that went outside the lines and covering that up. And we get just that pop of gold going on too. I am going to make so many of these backgrounds. Like, I cannot get over how much I love this. For our card base, we're going 11 by 4 1/4. We score it 2 1/8, and then I will put the fold line on the left-hand side and score it 5 1/2. Then I will fold them both towards the center, and I'm burnishing these. I want this to stay nice and creased and folded and not pop up a whole bunch. And I will trim off, once again, the sliver on the right-hand side. I'm going to cover the entire thing. I trimmed the panel down to 5 1/2 by 4 1/4, and I was like, I will not trim this any smaller. I refuse. It was killing me to cut anything off of it. And so I put my glue onto my card base. That way I can slide this all the way up to the fold line, and I'm not going to have anything weird hanging out there. Then I'll take it to my trimmer and I will cut off the extra in my trimmer, and I'll get a nice, neat cut. I will say too, that is a really deep emboss on some very fine lines. And so the card base is sturdier than the embossed panel at this point. This is just 80-pound cardstock. And so this was a nice way to make sure I wasn't going to accidentally pull or tear something, because you're doing a lot of like small damages when you stick something through an embossing folder, right? You're stretching that paper. So I trimmed off the other side. I've got my little gap in the middle, and then we can start working on our butterfly. So this gets tricky, right? This is not a symmetrical pattern, and I want mine hanging off the edge. I'm gonna hand deliver this. I don't want to have to slide this off of the card. I don't want someone accidentally tearing it, trying to get it off of there. So I am lining up my butterfly where I think I want it, and then I'm gonna chop off part of the bottom of the butterfly. You don't have to. You absolutely do not have to, but it is a pain, if I'm honest, to try to slide that bottom piece onto the left flap when we have broken the connection with the large piece that easily goes onto the left flap. I have some mint tapes, just like Post-it tape, and I'm going to put this on my butterfly right down that cut line, right where my two flaps meet. That is also going to help me. So I have a butterfly with tape on it, and then I have the butterfly that I drew on. I'm going to tape this butterfly to my desk right on one of my grid lines because this is going to help me when I go to add my glue. Then, and this is killing me, you guys, I'm going to trim this off. In my head, this didn't need to happen. I was dreaming of this card for like a week, and I sat down to make it, and quite frankly, I don't think anybody would fiddle as much as I did to make it work without cutting it. So that's why I'm doing it this way. You could also create a little mechanism out of circles to put on the back, or out of really thin rectangles to put on the back, and that would work too, okay? You could modify what we've done before. I still love this card, and I'm going to keep playing with this mechanism for asymmetrical patterns because I think it's so awesome. So I put a piece of cardstock right along that tape so I could see for sure where the glue could go and where it couldn't. And I took one of my butterflies where I've hacked off the bottom of it, okay, and I glued it to the right-hand side. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and tape it right back down. I find it easier to line it up when I pick it up, but I'm going to tape it back down. I'm going to add my cardstock back onto it, leaving the other side exposed, and I'm adding glue only to the top of the butterfly because we cut the bottom of that half off. Then I will line up the other one. So essentially, I have glued the right-hand side of two of the butterflies and the left-hand sides of two of the butterflies. I'm 3 layers thick, but there is an opening between layers on each side. So I'm sliding that opening on the left onto the left flap, and I'm lining up that tape, it's still on there, with the cut line in the card. And I will flip this over and mark on the butterfly where it's overhanging. Only on the back piece or pieces, I am going to trim so that this will fit inside the card. I went a little bit inside the pencil line that I made just to make sure I've got room. Okay, so I'm going to slide that gap onto the right-hand side, and then I'll fit in the left-hand side, and I'm going to make sure everything's working the way it's supposed to be. And once it fits and I'm like, yes, this is good, this is what's supposed to happen, I'll remove the tape. I have this piece now that's 3 thick, and I'm just going to go ahead and ink on top of it. I went a little heavier handed than I meant to at first, but it works out just fine. I'm adding that black shimmer ink just to the middle so that when I add this layer to the top, you get sort of a gradient from that pewter black into the navy blue. This was purple cardstock that I sprayed with my blue Mica and Spritz inks. And so from the front, it doesn't look purple at all. There are 2 separate dies, one for the frame and then one that you drop into the frame to create this piece. It's so gorgeous. It's so pretty. So I'm just going to hold that down and make sure everything's in place, and then we can start decorating the top of this butterfly. He comes together pretty quickly once you know what you're doing. So I added a little ink to the bottom of the body. I am going to stack it up 3 deep, mostly because those antennae only exist on this body piece, and I don't want them getting damaged as we slide the butterfly on and off the card. I just used black cardstock for my extra layers because I use 110-pound black cardstock, and it was going to be a little bit faster than stacking I don't know how many layers of 80-pound cardstock, but really you could do it either way. There's also a little tiny piece that goes in the center of the body that I have cut out of some gold mirror cardstock. Again, from that same treasured gold cardstock pack. It's got 5 different finishes in there. And so we used like a matte gold on one card, and now we're using the mirror gold. I've used that same mirror gold for the outermost layer of the peacock eyes, the eyes of the feathers. I think that's what you call them. And so there's 2 different sizes. I assembled most of them off camera. It's not complicated once you know what you're looking at, right? So the largest piece to me is green if you're going based on sort of normal peacocks. And then you want some kind of blue and then an accent color. And I've used that same mirror gold. When I went to add the body of my butterfly onto the wings, I didn't realize that there's nothing behind the head. So they've got glue up there that I don't want there, and I did take the time to remove it. I just take the pokey end of my tool and I just kind of wiggle it, and it does pick up the glue pretty well, especially on a small space like that. It pretty much disappeared, even though it's on black cardstock, and I think dark cardstock sometimes shows that even more than lighter cardstocks. I marked with a gold pen where the larger eyes go, and I'll add those first. I am using Barely Art Glue, and I tell you what, they slip and slide around on here because that mica is non-porous, right? So it's sort of part non-porous, part porous. I maybe would have done better with my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, but if you're patient, the Barely Art will work just fine as well. Then I'll add the smaller ones. They go just in a couple of places, so there's 9 total. My husband looked at this and he was like, why does the one wing look different? Why? I don't understand, you guys. It's so pretty. Okay, so this is from this kit, and I think there are a couple of sentiments that would work really, really well here. I've already used one of them that says, in order to change a color, you have only to change its background. So I'm going to use this one. To create your own world takes courage. It's by Georgia O'Keeffe. When I was in the 5th grade, one of my teachers was somehow related to Georgia O'Keeffe. So I learned all about her, and I just, I love her, and I love this quote. And I think it's really fitting for our butterfly. Like, not everybody's gonna get it. It's gonna be a little too different for some people. On the inside, I have a white piece of cardstock that's 3 by 4 inches. So the same as the sketch, right? If you were cutting pattern paper. And then 2.5 by 1.5 for my gold mirror cardstock matte. And then I'll use my removable adhesive for my sentiment. And that opens up beautifully. I know our butterfly is not the prettiest thing on the back. All you actually have to trim is the edge of the wing that overlaps that right-hand side. But if you trim it more, it's a lot easier to get on and off. So I felt like I was doing you a disservice not to show you that option. I hope that you will try this with some kind of asymmetrical die cut and let me know how it goes, and let me know how you did it, because I'm going to keep playing with this. I will find another way to do this. Here are the 3 cards we made today. I would love to know which of these is your favorite. If you're interested in the free printable, all I ask is that you subscribe to my channel. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to be notified every time there's a new free kit. Then when you click more or show more, you'll find links to all of the other videos and printables we've talked about today, along with all the supplies that we've used. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.